In January 2025, President Donald Trump issued an executive order to end birthright citizenship for children born to parents who are undocumented or lawful permanent residents. However, courts throughout the country blocked the order. Last week, the Supreme Court started its hearing against ending birthright citizenship and still pushed back on the action. Siouxland Public Media spoke with Revathi Vongsiprasom, an immigration lawyer, on how ending birthright citizenship would impact all communities. Do you think the Supreme Court will vote in favor of ending birthright citizenship?
I wish I could tell into the future so badly. However, I really just do not believe that it is likely that the Supreme Court is going to overturn birthright citizenship. I mean, this is something that has been in law and in practice for 150 years. And the implications of upending this legal protection and how an individual is determined to be a citizen of the country, quite frankly, would wreak havoc. And I don't believe that we are positioned to absorb the reality of what may follow if we are to undo birthright citizenship.
According to the American Immigration Council, after the Civil War, Congress wrote the 14th Amendment, where it says all people born or naturalized in the United States and subject to U.S. law are citizens. I asked Vongsiprasom if there will be attempts to change the framework of birthright citizenship if the Trump administration is unsuccessful in overturning the law. This is her response.
I think that will there be attempts to change birthright citizenship if this administration fails in their mission to undo birthright citizenship? Yes, I do believe that there probably will be further attempts. However, because the law is what it is, I don't believe that those changes will be successful. I mean, even right now, right? The president, we're here at this point in time because the president enacted an executive order. And that executive order was challenged because it's unconstitutional. And that is what has brought us before the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the country, right? And so are there possibilities, that there will be other attempts to try to curb citizenship? Yeah, I'm sure there probably would be. Will they be successful? I don't believe so, because we're going to see that continuation of challenging those attempts based on what is legal and what is constitutional.
Here, Vongsiprasom explains how ending birthright citizenship will impact future generations.
If we end birthright citizenship, a child's status is then going to be dependent on the status of their parents. And what that risks is creating this essentially a permanent second-class group where kids are born and raised here. We go to school together, but they are legally treated as an outsider. People often think, what do you mean by they would legally be treated as an outsider? Look at the history of the United States in general. When the 14th Amendment was put into existence, Black persons were not recognized as citizens. And so this was one of the main reasons for this constitutional amendment to come forth. We've also seen it with Native American populations, where Native Americans who are indigenous to this land, whose land was stolen from them, were not acknowledged as U.S. citizens until 1924. And even then, were not given voting capacity until the 1960s. I say this because history has shown us that when citizenship is not automatic, when it's not given right at birth, you end up with persons who grow up American in every practical way, yet are not recognized that way under the law. People can make the argument, well, don't we already have second-class treatment based on race, for example, which that's a very prudent point to make. The difference is that the citizenship allows for legal protection. We have the Non-Discrimination Act now in place to help protect individuals from experiencing discrimination based on race. Being a citizen from the onset is a legal protection. Now, when we talk about further risk to children and to future generations, there's a large risk of what would happen if these persons are essentially left stateless. So when we talk about statelessness, we're talking about people who don't legally belong anywhere. And in today's world, that's a very high probability that there's a very real consequence with that. When you look at a lot of countries and how they define citizenship, if it's based on bloodline or political control of land, when borders are unstable, citizenship and the ability of people to exist in a space is greatly impacted. That is a large risk that I perceive, and a lot of my colleagues will perceive as well, that if you end birthright citizenship, we're going to have future generations of stateless children who then have their own offspring who then are also then stateless. And the question then becomes, what country is going to recognize this individual and is willing to ensure that their rights are protected, that they're responsible for that person? And to have clear ties to another country and to have citizenship in a country, that is a very critical aspect to access to living a fulfilling and productive and stable life within a country.
A Center for Migration Studies report states there are about 4.7 million mixed status households, with 4 million including a U.S. citizen. It also says 5.5 million U.S.-born children who are younger than 18 years of age live with undocumented immigrants. It also shows if the undocumented person is deported, the deportation has an economic impact on the household, with its overall income dropping over 48%.
I'd like to say something else. Another thing that people talk about with citizenship is this idea of like clear ties, right? That you have clear ties to a country, and that in itself is a privilege, like we talked about. And if the United States is going to move away from birthright citizenship, we risk placing millions of children into that level of uncertainty, where their sense of belonging and their sense of country and their ability to fully be American is going to be dependent on complex global politics than the simple fact that they were born in the United States. And there is a heaviness to that we don't have to choose. We don't have to go down that road.
According to the American Immigration Lawyers Association, unconditional citizenship by birth on national soil applies in countries including the US, Canada, and Mexico. There are some countries that grant citizenship at birth only if specific requirements are met. These countries include France, Germany, and Ireland. In other countries such as China, Singapore, and Japan, citizenship is granted by the child's parents regardless of birthplace. Now we hear Vongsiprasom explain how ending birthright citizenship will impact immigrant communities.
Ending birthright citizenship would impact current immigrant communities drastically and immediately. Even now, we've seen the impacts. You have a significant decrease of individuals reaching out and cooperating with very vital systems that help us live a safe life. Specifically in our office, we have seen an increase in individuals not reporting acts of violence and acts of harm that they have survived. This is only going to be compounded. Students were not going to school and missing a lot of school initially when this executive order had come out. We also have in our area and throughout the country many families that are considered mixed status families. Those are families that have different immigration statuses within that household. Now with all of this happening, this resurgence of this current administration taking office in 2025, there's an increase in stability for individuals who find themselves in mixed status families. The instability is going to be very present. And with that, what options do they have to maybe protect that parent that doesn't have status? What options do they have, if any, to help that parent achieve a certain status that would allow them to be here lawfully? All of those things are going to be impacted. And what does that look like? There's decreased cooperation with healthcare systems. There's decreased cooperation with law enforcement agencies. That's all based out of fear. There's folks who need prenatal care who are not getting prenatal care. You have the overall greater economic and social marginalization of not being able to be fully present and engaged in education and employment and all the things that many of us take for granted. The repercussions if birthright citizenship ends, I just envision mass confusion, mass chaos. Think of it like this. You go to the hospital. to deliver a baby. Now hospitals need to start verifying parents' status, which is not a practice necessary. And then that opens doors for more issues, more legal disputes. Do hospitals have the capacity to take on yet one more federal requirement to determine the citizenship of a child that has just newly entered this world and needs all these other treatments in general? Families could end up with children who have different legal statuses. That also then impacts the ability for that child and those families to experience stability in schools and employment and in local communities, just this idea of cohesion. We're also probably going to see a rise in people without clear legal status, which is going to raise access concerns for all these different areas. This becomes huge because there's a lot of these areas that also receive grant funding and federal monies. There are legal requirements that also get wrapped up into that. We saw a lot of challenges come up when the definition of a qualified alien changed under Personal Work Responsibility Act. Folks who were providing services to individuals lawfully were then like, oh, this qualified alien definition has changed, and now I can't provide supportive services for individuals.
In 2025, eligibility restrictions were placed on automatic approval of SNAP benefits to exclude refugees, green card holders, and asylum seekers. The National Immigration Law Center provides an example of what Vongsiprasom was explaining. Due to the removal from SNAP benefits, a parent who is a refugee becomes ineligible for benefits. However, their children who are U.S. citizens would still qualify, but the family would receive a lower amount than what they were given before. Ending birthright citizenship would not only make children stateless, they would become ineligible for federal programs such as SNAP. What protections are in place to prevent the end of birthright citizenship?
I mean, right now, the Constitution, right, the 14th Amendment, which is great. We also have Supreme Court precedent, which firmly supports birthright citizenship. The reality of ending birthright citizenship would really require a very, very stark shift in the Supreme Court's interpretation of what is birthright citizenship. You know, we could talk about a constitutional amendment that could be on the table. The reality of a constitutional amendment passing, which requires supermajority approval, is not likely. I'm cautiously hopeful that we are in a place where birthright citizenship is not going to be ended and that there are adequate protections in place to prevent that from happening.
How would ending birthright citizenship impact Indigenous communities?
You know, this is a really interesting facet. I feel like it's not really talked about often and is really overlooked. Native American citizenship is really tied to both concepts of tribal sovereignty and the Constitution. I think that our Native American populations are going to face a lot of legal uncertainty and chaos as well, because the people who are in charge of putting forth all these changes, should birthright citizenship be ended, are going to be impacting these Indigenous communities. For example, all of this increased ICE enforcement has led to multiple Native American individuals across the country being unlawfully detained. That's just one facet of this very large spectrum. It's also very critical for us to note that in the arguments yesterday, it was quite clear that the Supreme Court really does not understand immigration law, which really goes for arguably the average individual and also goes for most attorneys. It is a very different world. It's hyper complex. Those are really important things to understand, because if we're going to end birthright citizenship, we really need to understand how that's going to impact every facet and every thread of the American fabric. It's going to raise a lot of unnecessary complex questions and jurisdiction issues and federal recognitions. For what purpose are we going to append all of these various different infrastructures?
Is ending birthright citizenship meant to target a certain group of immigrants?
I think when people imagine the face of an undocumented individual, unless people are really doing the introspective work to check themselves, there is typically a more melanated shade that appears when they think about that. Now, is this meant to target a particular country of citizens? I don't know. But if you look at the history, it's pretty easy to see that there are some strong parallels, that there are some strong commonalities of where immigration enforcement is particularly heavy.
The Supreme Court is expected to make a decision on birthright citizenship by late June or early July. I'm Alejandra Perez for Siouxland Public Media News.